As he got ready with his spear, the fans cheered for him and called him Sungane Bolt. Ertha thought that he could be either the hero or the villain. But he thought it didn't matter to him if he was a hero or a bad guy as he smashed through the wolf that was holding the man hostage. He promised to help everyone if he could, even though he knew he wasn't a hero but just a regular person. When the wild animals came after him angry because he had lost his weapon, he used his ultimate fist, which he had honed over 1,000 years of training, to smash their mouths. Ertha saw that he was different from most people because he could make decisions more quickly and calmly than most people. Lita took care of an amazing monster for over 1,000 years. She could only admire Lita's hard work. But she realized that it wasn't all because of what she did. It was because of how well Yu-Ilin trained him. When the military started threatening Yu-Ilin with guns, the people who were cheering for him were furious because they were showing him no respect. When the girl in the military started to apologize to him, Ilin quickly disappeared from her sight and went out to kill enemies in order to get the mana stones. While the axe brought him back, the girl asked him to join the government and help them with their work, but he wasn't interested. Ertha agreed with his choice, since they would only be a burden if he went it alone. Ilin started asking them to buy the bodies from him because he could cut them up. He knew that the military could use them. The girl then asked him about the mana stones, but he wasn't going to give them to the military. The people in charge were so impressed by his skills that they told the girl to try to seduce Yu-Ilin and bring him in. In the hopes of getting to know him, he was given $37 million in cash for all of the monster bodies. The attempt to seduce Yu-Ilin went horribly wrong because he didn't even care about how the girl looked. After a short time, he used a device he made to hide himself from them. Yu-Ilin then tries to move on by making his first class an assassin so that he can add mana power to his stealth skill, which will later use mana. But Ertha tells him to become a lancer or a grappler because the skills he learned from Lita were based on close combat with a spear. Ertha thought he was lucky to be taught by a higher being when he thought he was a loser. He didn't even seem to know about subclasses, since the internet didn't have any information about them and Ertha didn't use social media because he thought it was a waste of time. She was glad that Yu-Ilin had the freedom to choose the lancer on his own. Also, he chose his skill to get the unique job called Blurred Lancer for the first time. This showed that it was made just for him. At first, his skill didn't seem useful to him, but when his body changed, he began to feel very differently. Even though he was sad that his title didn't change, what worried him the most was that he didn't get any mana skills, which meant that his title would stay the same even in the second class. But Ertha thought he was special, so she kept an eye on him even though he was a lower being. Then, after hiding the money case he got from the government, they decided to look for proxies because the reward would keep going up. Then, as they talked about poison resistance, they came face to face with a huge bear monster. The military started shooting and firing missiles at the bear monster, but none of them worked because the monsters could only be fought with mana and human strength. As the monster walked in the opposite direction, he kept hitting the buildings, which began to fall down. Yu-Ilin took his time so that his first attack would be the most powerful. He did this because he knew that the monster wouldn't notice him until he made contact with it. Our lone hero Sungane Bolt stood out like a dying star in front of everyone, but he couldn't attack the monster with just one attack like he wanted to. As he went back into his stealth mode, he started telling everyone to get away from the situation. But he remembered the time he was able to cut off a piece of Lita's hair, making her the happiest angel that day. He was able to do the same attack again by putting all of his strength into one spot. The big bear fell to the ground, but his spear stayed in the air. When Yu-Ilin was busy taking things from the dead monster, some strangely powerful people showed up. All of the people with abilities were surprised to see the mask, since he had been renamed the Sungane Bolt not long before. Yujun, who was the most outgoing member of the group, talked to Yu-Ilin and challenged him to beat him in the future. As usual, Yu-Ilin couldn't say to the man in front of him what he wanted to say. One of the military guys decided to tell him about an app that could help him find dangers in the area so that he could get rid of the monsters. Higher-ups in the military squad knew why heroes did what they did and decided not to get in his way, since even Ertha thought he was smart. Then, they went on their way to fight monsters and make money from it. They sold everything to the military and got $10 million in cash, and Ertha erased the memories of the officials just in case. The next day, he got a message that the link between the two worlds had been fixed, which made him feel like he was going to be left alone again. Ertha was sorry to have to tell him the bad news again, but she couldn't change his mind because it was his fate to be left alone. but she told him that he could go to the other world if he found the place of a greater being. This gave him hope that he could see Lita again. Ertha felt more and more like she was the one who brought their love to each other. The whole country was put under martial law because the government thought the streets were too dangerous for regular people. Surprisingly, his mother found out that he was the same hero named Sungane Bolt when he talked his father into going to the other world again. Even though he was wearing different clothes, it looks like his mother recognized him when she saw him on TV. Then she left the house, telling him to be careful around bad people because she wanted what was best for him. Ertha then went to heaven to get more rewards for her quest, but Yu-Ilin told her to bring some ice cream with her. Then, since Ertha scared him by being taller than the last time he saw her, he decided to spend his time in the storage unit he bought with the money he had. After she got back from heaven, she gave him the rewards for his quest one by touching his hand. She also gave him the fire from heaven that will never go out. It looks like Lita was the one in heaven who cared the most about him because she sent him so many gifts because she knew what he needed. Since he couldn't go to the other world, the heavens gave him the task of making a dungeon. Even though Ilin didn't agree at first because none of what they said made sense to him, he had to say yes for the sake of humanity because he was ready to help him with plans, materials, and the best tools. When he started working on the materials, he knew he might be able to make weapons that could stand up to the god's power. Slowly but surely, she started to see what Lita might have seen in him when she kept watching over him all by herself for the past 1,000 years. Ertha couldn't believe she had been waiting for him for more than 5 hours while he finished the work so quickly. When the job was done, she hired her fellow angels to finish the remaining mana work for it. None of them could believe that a person made the trap of destruction on his own. They kept helping him because all he had to do was have the will. They said they would take care of the rest. He became lonely because he had a strong sense of who he was, and it only took him one try to get over it. Everyone told him how good he was, and some even asked him to set up the dungeon while they flew with him. They stopped in a lonely field of land, and the monsters all over the country started to pay less attention to them as the dungeon materials kept drawing them in. Even when everything was going wrong, Yu-Ilin knew how powerful God was because, in the end, everyone was dancing in his palm while he enjoyed Lita's presence over him for 1,000 years. He promised to get stronger on his own every day so he could be free. Ertha told Yu-Ilin that the dungeons were working well, and the angels went back to heaven to get the huge amounts of mana needed for the trap of destruction. He kept looking at the information about the angels, but Ertha made it clear that Lita couldn't be sent to Earth anytime soon. Ilin went back into his storage room with a strong desire to make more gloves and boots out of the materials he already had and make them better. He worked day and night without getting tired because he was stronger than most people. Ertha used her skills to help him make bear armor that would work like a porcupine and scare away a full-grown tiger. He kept making more gear based on what he needed, which made him even less noticeable. As he put on his new suit, he heard the sound of someone fighting monsters outside. Yu-Ilin wasn't afraid to fight the new second-class monster because he only cared about making new things from the better monsters. When he fixed the spear he already had, the attack power went up by 300. The leopard-like monster was much stronger than the bear he had fought before. Its attack destroyed the military and the power of the mana fighters. Knowing that the monster couldn't see him, he made a critical hit on the first try and saved everyone from the monster. Ertha told him to be careful because the leopard was after him, but he stood his ground with confidence. The monster was growling in pain as he pierced through his eyes. Empress suddenly showed up at the scene as she was attacking the monster from above with the help of an attack helicopter. When everyone, including the Empress, was afraid that the monster would kill Sungane Bolt, Ertha made a porcupine that hit the monster and hurt it. Yu-Ilin kept getting critical hits while grabbing the monster with the boots he made that were made stronger by the porcupine. Even though the low-powered humans' attacks didn't do much damage, they did have an effect because it was like a bunch of ants attacking a big elephant. All of a sudden, the situation got much worse as the monster kept quickly changing into the third class. Empress moved into the scene because she thought the move was dangerous, but it didn't work very well because the gap between the two levels was too big. Empress was smart enough to realize that her best use would be to help the hero while he stopped the monster from regenerating. This would use up all of her remaining mana and make her useless against the monster. The Thunder Spirit moved into Ilin's body, and Ertha was shocked to see how much mana he could really hold. Yu-Ilin was finally able to kill the monster, which helped him level up to 28 and gain a lot of experience. Everyone started cheering for their mysterious hero, Sungane Bolt, But he looked sad because all he wanted to do was take things from the dead creature. He agreed to take apart the monster because that was his specialty. While he was doing it, he noticed how pretty the Empress was. The Empress split the prize into 3 parts, and Yu-Ilin only needed one of them. He took a second-class mana stone and left the rest for everyone else. When everyone wanted the mana stone, he remembered some advice his mother had given him and used it. It worked like a charm, even though no one could stop him. Empress didn't give him his share because she knew she would need his help again. She paid him with the leather she got from the body, and everyone else did the same. Everyone there knew they would never be as good as him because he would do the butchering in the best way possible, even though they had just been complaining. He took advantage of the situation by asking for half of the share. They had to agree with him, but he didn't care. When it was time for him to go home, the Empress suggested that they start a party together because they were both on the same path. Even though he didn't agree with her, she gave him her business card before going back on her way. Back home, Eartha was going crazy over what was happening on Earth because she couldn't figure it out on her own, but Ilin stayed calm. He knew that worrying about it wouldn't help, and Korea was the only place where the monsters were about to move up to the next level. Ilin found the hole and said that the trap of destruction might have made the monsters stronger, which could have made them go berserk. Ilin kept working on making more traps of destruction because she knew the monsters needed to be caught faster so they couldn't eat people and get stronger. Ilin had been alone in the world for over 1,000 years, and Eartha wanted him to get stronger. This showed how much Ilin wanted to learn and grow. Then, one night, the angels got their mana back and came back to continue their job of trapping monsters in dungeons, while Ilin hoped there wouldn't be any dangerous monsters. Our guy had finally had enough of working too hard, and he wanted to sleep. Yu-Ilin changed a lot as he kept getting better at his job. He found out about these changes all at once after getting out of the shower. Even Eartha found it hard to accept that, even though he wasn't a higher being yet, he would become one if he kept getting better, just like Lita told her. The next morning, Eartha was again surprised to see that he could get an SSS rank just by sleeping, which was something the angel herself had never done. Seeing that Yu-Ilin was interested, she told him about skill evolution, which worked in the same way as title changes. She told him that each skill had to be used in a certain way for it to evolve, and that the more he did that, the higher the stakes would get. Yu-Ilin was strong because he had spent 1,000 years practicing martial arts. Using mana at the same time would make him the ruler of all creation in the Akashic record. Eartha knew that day would come, but she tries not to think about it at the same time because it could be dangerous. That concludes part 2 of this recap. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. What will happen next? If you would like to see a part 3 of this manhwa, let us know in the comments section below. Till next time.